they're going to start at 6:30, and at 8 o'clock you're still waiting on them to start. So that's when it's an early day. Thank you all for coming. My name is Lezlye Zupkus, and I'm the state rep for Bethany, Prospect, and Cheshire. And I'm sure most of you probably know Themis. Themis Klarides. I am the state representative for Woodbridge, about 2/3 of Orange and half of Derby. So Lezlye and I decided we would do this together because obviously our towns are connected. And I do a lot of these kind of things with Woodbridge and Orange. We do them together because obviously Woodbridge, Orange, and Bethany are very connected. So we figured we would, move it a little down the road and include Bethany and do it together. Good. So tonight, there's no really agenda. We'll just give you some highlights on kind of the session that has taken place. And then really it's questions and answers, thoughts, and just some conversation. Does that sound good? Okay, all right. Well, this session was a short session, and what that means is the session started in February and ended in May, the beginning of May, which generally, hello, Sal. So what in the last year and what will be next year, the session is the long session. It's a 6-month session, so it starts in January and ends in June, the beginning of June. So this session, I'll give you just some of the highlights and I'll let Themis add to it. Some of the things that were passed this session was a minimum wage increase, and no matter how you feel about it or not feel about it, I'm just telling you kind of the things that were passed. The minimum wage increase, a nurse practitioner independence bill was passed. There was some things on fracking. A fracking bill was passed. Universal pre-K. Nursing home transparency was passed. I wonder if that's one of the things that were...
a lot of the things we did, they always say and this is what we call the short year, as Lezlye explained, and we're not supposed to be dealing with any individual items, which we're only supposed to be kind of tweaking the budget from last year, from 2 years ago. We do a biennium budget, so we do a 2-year budget. So in the last 4 years, obviously there's been 2 budgets, and 4 years ago, as I'm sure most of you know, we had the largest tax increase in the state's history. And what happens is the years after that, we're supposed to be fixing it depending on the revenue that came in, the revenue that did not come in, more likely, and adding and taking away where things change throughout time. So in this year, we tend to do less individual items, less legislator things, and more things the committee just wants to bring up that didn't come up. I don't know if one of the bigger deals, not in the big picture, to me the budget is the biggest deal of all because that's what, we philosophically believe in, and that's what affects you the most. Because it affects your taxes, it affects, the services you get, but I think a lot of you probably heard or read that we passed, we allowed Keno to be available to people, and then we repealed it this year. Which it's a gambling, one of those machines. I've never seen it myself, but I asked the same question. So then other states allow them, and they put them in that kind of bars and that kind of thing. And that was just a reason to get more revenue, which has been our, an issue. We've had less revenue throughout the past few years, and we did a big bill on nursing home transparency. Because there were some issues throughout the state in nursing homes, and clearly when we deal with children, our elderly, those are 2 of our most vulnerable populations, and we put a lot of extra care into what's going on with them. And there were issues in certain nursing homes, and so the answer would be let's try and fix those issues. So if there's 100% of the nursing homes, if 10% have the problem, one would not assume that it's a widespread problem. You don't kind of change how the whole operation works, but unfortunately that's how our legislature and our governor works at certain times. So the bill that was passed, in my opinion, and I know in Lezlye's opinion and a lot of people up there, was not a bill that would particularly fix that problem. And it was very controversial, and we proposed alternatives to things that we thought would fix the problem. But that was a big issue going on this year. We brought up physician-assisted suicide again, which we have the past several years. It didn't go anywhere because obviously, once again, very controversial. And a lot of people have a problem with it, you know, I mean, I had a problem with it, and a lot of people did, and it was just one of those things that maybe they'll live to fight another year, but it didn't go anywhere this year. One of our, and this will tell you some of the nonsense that goes on up there. I know I'm hot too, it's been warm in here. Genetically modified grass seed. Anybody heard about that? But, you know, unfortunately, I understand that everybody has certain issues that are of importance to them, and I don't diminish that in any way, shape, or form, but when we're dealing with a $1.5 billion deficit next year, you know, whether we can or can't sell something that doesn't even exist yet, really wasn't something that people had a lot of stomach for, and it ended up being an issue between the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, which I didn't want to get into. We had an issue with the drug-free zones again. I don't know if you guys followed that last year, how they want, right now, if you sell drugs within 1,500, feet or yards, of a school, you know, the penalty that you get once you're arrested and convicted is greater than if you did it somewhere else. You know, which I think most people agree with. But there is a faction, particularly the urban centers, that believe that that's not fair. And it should go down to 300 feet, which we like to call amnesty for drug dealers. You know, we killed that bill last year after a 6-hour debate on the floor of the House. Actually, our caucus in particular just killed that bill. And you know, and this year, we had an issue with it again. We did a lot of work with sexual assault on school campuses and interlock device for drunk drivers, which was something that's been going for the past 2 years. You know, and you know, we wanted to kind of give you some of the highlights of things that people are particularly interested in, but we really want you to be able to ask questions and not sit here and hear us blabber on. We have copies for you guys to take when you leave of the acts, the special acts, and the public acts, excuse me, that we passed this year. So you can kind of take a look at, and as always, you know, give us a call and ask us questions.
One bill that I'll just mention that we didn't mention that was very home to Bethany was about horses. There was a child that got bit, and they took it to court, and they wanted to say that horses were vicious animals, and so we came up and we were able to put forth a bill to say, no, horses are not vicious animals. Accidents happen and all, but horses are not vicious animals. And I know that was a big issue for people here in Bethany because there's so many horses and, you know, horse farms and all here that I got a lot of comments from constituents here, and we were able to make that happen, which was great because, you know, then what do? Your insurance goes up, you have, you know, people leave, all of these things, and we need to stop that from happening. So that was something really good for Bethany, actually, that happened.
So do you guys have anything you want to ask us?
Can I just say a word?
Of course.
There was a meeting in Woodbridge that people from Bethany attended pertaining to the intersection. That's that petition of Route 63 and 67 and what they're doing up there. I don't know how familiar you in the room are with what's going on up there, but this study was done in 2004. The people from DOT were there. They never called a meeting to inform us of what was going on, meaning the people in Bethany that were affected. The study and the data that they came up with, the conclusions, were from 2004 to 2006. All their assumptions pertaining to queuing, the backup of traffic to the light, and the problems that would be caused because of the increase in population in Naugatuck and to the north. And by widening the road with turning lanes, and by taking people's property, and by lowering the street by 3 feet, so when you come up the hill going from the north, you'll have a better vision of the road, so you have a tendency to go faster. Right now, you sort of slow down because you're going up the hill there, and that's obviously going to be an issue. The other thing that was brought up at the meeting was the problems in winter. If there's a light there on 63 coming up the hill, going north, as well as going south, because the hill, bringing it down 3 feet, is going to be steeper coming up at the further end. The trucks have stayed away from this area, and because of the widening of the road and the ability to turn now, you'll see much more truck traffic on 67 and 63, which will cause more pollution and traffic in the area. They basically stayed away from it because it's hard to maneuver, at that intersection for large trucks now. So all those things were brought up at the meeting, and I've been in touch with Senator Crisco, and I've sent it to you as well, pertaining to the issues. It was very difficult that night. There was about, what would you say, 50, 75 people there, if not more, that were very frustrated. At one point I got up and they were just not responding to our questions and just repeating themselves. And I sort of said, if you were in our position right now, because we said, can we compromise? Can we sit and talk? There was no response. I said, if you were in our position right now, and our lives are affected in Bethany and Woodbridge here by what's going down when you're using that road and coming and going, or those at that intersection, I said you'd be very frustrated. And it's why government has a bad rap.
You mean DOT?
DOT was like, I could have hit my head against the wall and everybody else in the room. So we were all very upset. In any case, this is a petition that we put together. It is a little too late now. And it's terrible for the people that live on that road itself, because what they're doing is they've taken their property from them. If you see where some of the flags are now, one of the people, if they walk out their front door and they're not paying attention, will, they've got about 7 feet, and they'll walk right into the road. So we're all concerned about the pollution, the noise, the backup, the queuing, and if they put a light there, it's going to make it worse. So those of you coming from Bethany and Woodbridge, before the intersection, either coming or going with a light there, are going to be backed up terribly. And you're already experiencing that down at the blue check, because when you come up to the light, in the morning especially, you're backed up. But this will be even worse because of the truck traffic, and it will also affect that intersection as well. And it's dangerous for people trying to get onto the road, especially crossing the road, from this end going south, because traffic will be speeding, and it's going to be more, and there's going to be more of it. So I would appreciate it. I'll give you my name. I have a petition here, and I'll give you my phone number and my email. And if it's something that you feel you'd like to support, just email me, and we have people working on it, and we'll get your petition, your signature, and hopefully they won't put a light there, so traffic will flow, and it just won't stop in that area and cause tremendous problems for all of us, okay? My name is Peter Aronson. You can reach me at P like in Peter, H, and I'll let you get a pen if you're interested. I'll give you a minute. Okay, for those interested, it's P like in Peter, H like in Harriet, AARONSON @hotmail.com. And if you just send me an email and say you'd like to support us, you can join, hundreds of others that are doing the same. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your time as well.
Oh, no, thank you.
How you doing? My name's Mike, and the five of us, at least the five of us here, are all here for the same issue. And that issue is, you can sit down. I can't for the whole time. But the issue that we're here for is for your help to fix Congress in D.C. Let me explain to you.
That's all?
That's all. But we can do it. It's not something that's impossible. It's hard, but it's not impossible. So I think probably everyone here is probably fed up with Congress, right? Everyone here is probably a little tired of Congress, not exactly getting what you want. And the way we see it is that 95% of the time, the person with more money wins their election. And so all they care about is raising money. That's what they do. There was actually a recent thing that came out that said the average Republican congressman spends anywhere from 7 to 8 hours every day raising money. So who do they respond to? They respond to the people who give them money. So we think money is completely corrupted to Congress. So we're turning to you for help. So obviously we can't turn to Congress. They're not going to help us. They're been successful in that system. They're the ones that are able to raise the money, and they're doing fine. We can't pass a state law. Montana tried that. And the Supreme Court, who, by the way, gets money from the same folks, and it goes from the junkets. Each of the Supreme Court justices get over $100,000 and more every year from the same folks. Anyway, so they're not going to help us either. They've struck down the Montana law. So that's not the way to go either. But luckily, the Founding Fathers were complete geniuses. The Founding Fathers said, look, Congress could sometime theoretically get corrupted by something, in this case money, and who do the people turn to? They turn to you. So they put into the Constitution something called an Article 5 congressional amendment. And what Article 5 says is that the state legislatures, if there's enough of them, has to be 35 states, they can call for a congressional amendment. Now, every single generation in this country has passed a constitutional amendment to the Constitution. It's our turn. It's been 35 years since we've had a constitutional amendment. We're asking for you to call for a congressional constitutional amendment. We've got the, actually we have two different things here. We have one.
I have the information.
Yeah, why don't you give that information?
So, the way that this works, there are two ways that we can call for an amendments convention. One is through, of course, through Congress, and we can't rely on it at this point. And the other is through the states. We need 34 of the states to pass a resolution calling for a convention so that we can get money out of politics. And what we have here is, let me see, I just gave you two things. I gave you a flyer that has more information about us. We're an organization known as Wolfpack, and we're a cross-partisan organization seeking to restore representative government by removing the corrupting influence of money in politics through the Article 5 Convention, because as he said, nothing else will work, and nothing else will really stick. So, in our resolution, and unfortunately I didn't print the Connecticut specific ones, but I can fax that information or email the information to you. So our resolution says, whereas the United States Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United, the Federal Election Commission, removed restrictions on amounts of independent political spending, and whereas the removal of those restrictions has resulted in the unjust influence of powerful economic forces which have supplanted the will of the people by undermining our ability to choose our political leadership, write our own laws, and determine the fate of our state. And then it goes on to say Article 5, and it requires 2/3 of the legislatures to call for the convention. Now, the amendment won't be passed without 3/4 of the states ratifying it. So what we're doing right now is opening up the conversation so that we can propose ideas and get different perspectives from all of the states so that it won't be too left or too right of an amendment.
We're not the first ones to do this, so Vermont has already passed this.
And we've been having a lot of success so far in Massachusetts and Texas and California as well.
But Vermont already passed this resolution, JRS 27, that's in here as well. So they've already decided, very bipartisan, the Senate in Vermont passed it 25-2, the House in Vermont passed it 94-47 or something. So it's completely bipartisan support, where everyone agrees, you've got to get the money out of politics. There's no other way to save our Congress. They're never going to represent us unless you take that away. So we're asking for your help.
Can I just ask, like, what do you mean by that, though? I mean, what does that actually mean? What did they pass?
In
And what-
Vermont?
Yeah, and what does taking the money out of politics mean?
Here's JRS 27.
What is the instrument that you're talking about? Are you talking about changing the Constitution are you coming up with some new way to pass a law through a referendum from the states?
This would be a conversation to propose an amendment to the Constitution.
And what would the constitutional amendment say?
Well, it would be 35 states coming together, and those 35 states will all have to agree on the language.
But what's the general
The
gist of the
idea is to redefine money so that it does not equal speech. Essentially what we want to do, and we can call this through the states, it's written into our federal constitution, is we're taking the key gear out of the system that right now has been running our no longer representative democracy. So that's really what we're trying to do.
So,
I feel stupid here, but I don't, let me just, so, this would actually be amending the Constitution, okay? And what part of the Constitution addresses money right now?
Nothing at the moment.
freedom of speech is what they go after.
Right, but citizens.
Right,
United
and what
is
do
not.
you, what is the, I mean, in this Vermont thing, is there an actual proposal of how it should be amended?
no, the 35 states have to get together and agree on that. That's why it's not going to be a...
What are your thoughts, though?
Well, I'm not going to be the one making a decision.
No, but I can't even, I mean, this is, I'm just trying to get a better understanding, I'm not, that's why I'm asking these questions, but I don't even know how one would go about amending the United States Constitution to...
Well, you could say, for example,
I
state...
don't, just because I don't know, not because I don't think there's a...
Sure, no, I talked to State Senator Tony Butcher, and she had an amendment that she wanted to pass forward that said that they should be well, for the state, so Connecticut should be federally funded. So there shouldn't be any more public money into the different state races. So that would be a fair balance. You wouldn't have, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing as a Republican. You got these guys going down to Sheldon Addison in Nevada, like bowing and scraping, Sheldon, what should I do, what should I do? And then he gives somebody $100 million. So no more of that. And same thing on the other side, no more of the unions having their people, and George Soros.
It's on both sides.
It's on both
Yes,
sides,
absolutely.
totally on both sides. It's a
So you're
bipartisan
talking about
thing.
having being taxpayer-funded elections.
Absolutely. Either taxpayer, I mean, depends, who knows what people coming together would decide. They could say completely taxpayer-funded elections. They could say, no outside money whatsoever. They could say,
So
no.
where would the money come from?
It have to come from
Good
general
question.
revenues. It have to come from general
Where-
revenues.
Right. and-
Absolutely. But would you rather have taxpayers paying for it, or would you rather have the Koch brothers or George Soros paying
Well, I have
for
to
it?
tell you, that's a question for the ages, because that's a very controversial question. That's something we went through in this state for many, many years before it was passed, and it was in fact something that was fought for many, many years. And now that we've had it for a few election cycles, it's proven that it does not take the corruption out of elections. I'm telling you, because we spend so much time trying to raise money and do it in a specific way. And listen, I'm not being critical, I'm just kind of this is kind of new to me.
Yep.
I'm just giving you our experiences with it in the past on a state level. So, I mean, sometimes it's, the old adage, be careful what you wish for. Because even though people are raising money in this way, now people are raising money in a different way. And once it was passed, then all along the way, they've changed the laws, exactly what a lot of people wanted. Then, they weren't happy with it. And it's a huge endeavor. I'm not saying it's not worth the conversation, because it is.
Well, I would say the one thing in Tony's bill that I would say is a problem is that you can opt out. So you can go back to those funders, and you could say, put your corporate sponsorship on me, I'll be your man.
But I think you have to be able to opt out. I mean, I think, it's unconstitutional to not allow people to opt out. That's why we can opt out in Connecticut if we choose. But,
Well, we
I
think
mean,
that,
it's
we think that's
certainly-
why we have to
yeah,
disagree.
but most people don't opt out, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, 'cause-
I don't know what the number is, probably 95% of the people do not opt out.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say it's a big conversation to have, and we appreciate you coming here, and, it's certainly something we'll bring back and, talk about with our colleagues.
Well, we've certainly had luck before, and historically, this nation has used Article 5 to great effect. The 17th Amendment, which states that senators are directly elected by citizens, was originally proposed through the states with, I believe it was only 1 or 2 applications were missing for the 2/3. So we can do this. And Congress felt the pressure, and so what they did is they wound up passing the amendment themselves. Now, the issue that we're having, of course, we have questions about how do we affect campaign finance reform. But until we have something in our Constitution that says that money is not speech, we can't begin to have this conversation. We can't get down to the nitty-gritty of it.
Themis referenced our state's citizens election program and its difficulties and foibles. In general, what is your opinion, since you have been in the legislature, both pre and post citizens election program? What is your feeling about the program? And also, Representative Zupkus, a little newer to this, but I'm sure that you've been a party to the discussion about the citizens election program, the alterations to it last year, and where it's headed. And I'd like to know your opinion of the program as well.
Well, I mean, there's pros and cons to doing it both ways, since I've done it both ways. I guess my feeling on it is, I have 2 major philosophical beliefs. Number one, I believe that for every penny any of us take in a donation, from whoever it is, should be completely, open to the public. So that should all be, in the light of day. You should be able to go online and see every penny that I've taken from anybody. Before we had the taxpayer-funded elections and after. Okay, so I just believe that should be knowledge you should be able to have at the ready anytime. So that's my general feeling about fundraising. I know that there are limits. Before we had this, we had very strict limits on who we could take money from. For a house race, we could only take $250 from an individual. We couldn't take any money from a business unless it was in the form of an ad book, and that was still a $250 limit for the whole election. And the Senate could only take $500 per person. So we had one of the strictest campaign finance, money limitations, that kind of thing, to begin with before we even went into this. I guess my second thought on it is the whole intention of this was in the post-rolling year. This is where this really got its push. Corruption, to take corruption out of it, to take money out of it. The whole perception that if you give me money, then I'm beholden to you. Now, I have to be honest with you. There are people, I'm sure there are people, and we all know them, that are beholden to people that have given them money. But to me, that is based on what it's a morality issue, it's an ethical issue, and it's a character issue. I've said this and I'll keep saying it. If I can be bought for $250, then I have bigger problems than running a house race. Okay? I feel that way. If I am the person I am, she is the person she is. There are bad people. There are people that aren't ethical. There are people that aren't moral, and there are mostly good people. I don't believe that this taxpayer-funded election world we live in has stopped any of that. Because if I could only take $250 to begin with, now I can take $100. Okay, so is the extra $150 making a real difference in who's corrupt and who isn't? I don't believe in this state, through my experiences, which is what you're asking, that it has made any difference in that. And I just think it limits people and their ability to raise money. And as long as you know every dime I raise and are able to see it, it's not a secret, nobody's hiding it. If you say, well, Themis took money from XYZ person, and I don't like XYZ person, I don't like what he or she believes in, so I'm not voting for her, that's your right. That's just my general feeling on campaign finance. Because when we use that word reform, always remember, do you believe in campaign finance reform? Of course. Do you believe in education reform? Of course. That's one of those words, who says no to reform? But what does it really mean? What's the problem and how is it going to fix it? And that's where I think we kind of, that we're almost stuck in this middle of the road place now, where there was a problem, but it was a problem with somebody. Let's be honest, what John Rowland did was criminal. Whether you liked him or didn't like him, there were criminal actions. That has nothing to do with, our campaign finance laws, one way or the other. So, You know, it's one of those, we're gonna fix something that doesn't exist problem, and the problem that does exist, this isn't gonna fix. So, that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Themis. I wasn't here before then. It's when people give me, and it's $100 now as the max donation, when people give you money, it's not that, when somebody gives me money, I'm not saying I'm doing something for you, it's because they believe in me and in what I believe in and moving my visions and goals of moving our state forward. So that's what they're donating to. I agree, every penny should be accounted for, and it is. It's all online, and you can find out every donor, and it was. So, yeah, that's what it is. And, you know, it's funny talking about, the word or the titles, campaign reform, and what does that mean? That's a lot of the legislation. That bill, any bill may have a title, and then when you read into it, it has nothing to do with what the title is whatsoever. So, yes, should it all be transparent? Absolutely it should be, because we work for you.
And at the national level, the Disclose Act was filibustered, so we can't even find out who's giving them what. So very frustrating.
And I just believe that that's how it should be across the board.
Yeah.
If you know what the money, where people's money come from, then you can make your own decisions on what you think.
Well, this whole problem started when the Supreme Court said that the companies are individuals, and they can give any amount of money they want, they don't even have to publicly account for it. And then they followed it up with saying that individuals could give any amount of money. And so that's why in the last, 5, 8, whatever it is, they just had this swamp of money coming in. And not everybody knows where half is coming. And it affects both parties. And it's certainly not good. And then we're trying to, there's people who are trying to figure out ways of dealing with them. And some states have actually reduced some legislation that would get at this. To undo a Supreme Court decision is very difficult. It can be done, but it probably takes a number of years. So this may be a quicker way of getting it somewhere, but it's very unfortunate that that money was allowed in. But not only this vast sums, most people don't even know where they are, who they're going to. And it's not good. It's very, very dangerous to our democracy. Because the little person has absolutely no say whatsoever. I wanted to ask you about a couple of things that happened. Talk about fracking. What did the state do vis-a-vis fracking? Because it's a disaster, no matter where it's done, it's a disaster.
Yeah, they actually came up with a study, which we do a lot there, and they also said that they would allow so many gallons of it to come to Connecticut. I think it was like 2 swimming pools worth or something like that, to come in, because there are a couple of companies that are going to be testing it. So they are allowing that to come in to be tested in our state. But that's as far as it
I don't
got.
understand why would it be brought into Connecticut to be tested. I'm talking about drilling in Connecticut,
Oh, yeah, that's not,
trying to forestall.
yeah, that's not anywhere Barry at this point. This was just, that was again a controversial issue.
Yeah.
And there is not fracking here right now, I can't speak for future, but it's not here. But they did do a study. They're going to study it. They're going to bring some of the waste into Connecticut, but not like tons and tons and tons of
I'm
it.
talking about the waste is even more dangerous than the fracking.
Yes. So
But that was the real issue with the bill, it was the
Right.
disposal of that waste. And so
Yes.
there's a moratorium on it now while they're studying, because it was
I hope
so
you- I hope-
controversial.
I hope both you gals realize that the most precious resource we have in Connecticut, in any place, is water. Clean, sanitary water. Without water, you're nowhere. There's nowhere. So anything that endangers that, fracking waste, it's got all kinds of chemicals in it, you don't even know. It's very dangerous stuff. We're not allowed to be brought into Connecticut.
well, there's a big moratorium on it for now.
So
So
that
we're
is
just
like, what about the
studying it.
sexual assaults on campus?
Yeah, I mean, that was,
How can the legislature get involved with that?
well, we did get involved in it, and we've done a lot with sexual assault in the past years, and I've been actually very involved through a lot of domestic violence. I've done some,
Yes, domestic violence.
volunteer work with, I've been involved with my shelter for many years. I've done some volunteer work with them, and legal and just being there, because I think it's so important. And, we took it very, very seriously, what's happening on campuses, because, you know, that's a microcosm of society, and it's a different, you know, the setup is different. And so, you know, we passed some new laws in regard to that, to make that strict.
Feel that they do the law that will make it
Yes.
safer.
We hope so. You know, it's about, there was a lot to do with the Yukon, you know, that whole scenario that, and those ladies came forward and we had a whole hearing on it, and more of a reporting, I don't want to say mandates, but mandates on colleges to have resources available for people to go to and those kinds of things.
And having, and, you know,
Have
just
more resources than they've had.
more, but also letting the kids know what their resources are and their options. Because, you know, I mean, you could be 17, 18 years old and something happens, and you don't have any idea, you don't want to go to your parents, you know, you don't know where to, you're not, I mean, you're 18, but you're not, we all know you're not an adult at that point, and, you know, you don't know where to go, and to make that stuff available to kids, so if God forbid something like that happens, they know where to go, they know at least there's somebody there for them, and, you know, the reporting requirements
I
are
think the
different.
legislature could put pressure on the colleges in Connecticut, that's where, that's what the limit doesn't pass on the state, to make the colleges and universities more aware that they've got to do more than they've been doing. I mean, there's certain things you can't, you can require the colleges to do more than they're doing. So not just in terms of reporting after the events happen.
But it's also making them have sexual assault response teams
Yes.
at the school, so that's another thing that they're required to have now.
So I think that did happen, Mary, you know, putting more, because UConn was sitting there.
Oh, I
You
know.
know, and they had to. So I think that is a start, it started.
It has to be, most of the universities, not all, but a lot of them are run right now, and they just don't quite realize how serious it is.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm just curious, how come college students have to report to the administration versus going to the police?
They can go to the police, I mean, they can,
And why
obviously.
don't they? Because the colleges seem to have, all of them, whether it's private, public, whatever, they all have a vested interest in not reporting issues on campus.
I agree with you, and the problem is that, you know, partly what we said in that, you know, you don't really know what to do at that age. And so your first thought is, let me go to my whoever, you know, my RA, my, you know, whatever it is that is the person you're, you know, kind of is overseeing you at that point. And so that's the natural place for them to go. I think that for somebody, let's just say at UConn, to go, you know, to the Mansfield Police Department on their own, they can't be legally stopped from going. But I just think that it's, you know, we all know how it is when you're in college and this is your world. And, you know, and to go out on your own and have to do that, you know, and who knows if they're telling their parents, you know, at the time, and so that they'd be doing it, say, with their friend, and I think that's part of the issue. So, you know, I think our responsibility, especially in colleges that are state-owned colleges, is to make sure these kids know what their options are, know what their resources are, and have trained teams there to be able to deal with it. You know, and then if they choose to do something else, then, you know, that's absolutely within their right.
Does UConn police have arrest authority? I think they have legal jurisdiction there, aren't they? Yale has arrest authority. And so
You know,
each
I'm
school
not
is
really
different.
sure.
They're all different. So just because it's wasn't in this college, it's not going to be that way in another college.
Right.
Because of jurisdiction.
UConn has state authority,
Yeah.
same as state police. Yale is, they're sworn New Haven officers.
Right, but the UConn police, I mean, I think that going to the UConn police is, I think to the lady's question about going to, say, the administration, I mean, I know your point. I mean, they're trying to insulate this as much as possible and not let it get out, which I think is horrendous. You know, and it's our job, at least in state colleges, to make sure that that doesn't happen.
I was wondering, I know that when you announced your reelection bid, Representative Zupkus, you talked a lot about small businesses, and I was wondering what you, in your time this past session, have done for small businesses. I'm the daughter of a small business owner, so
I actually serve on the Commerce Committee, which has a lot to do with small businesses. We have a grant the DECD grant that comes out that they can take a part of. I've actually met with some small businesses. The manufacturing, I'm on the manufacturing caucus, and I have a couple of manufacturers in my district, and they have really come together and worked with us at the Capitol to get things done for their industry, which is wonderful, and really creating awareness on things that are good for them and not good for them, and working on those things such as regulations and taxes and all of those burdens on them to make that to make it easier to do business, because we all know we're one of the most unfriendly businesses state, and that is because of regulations and taxes on them, and we need to give them the room to grow. I'm not saying we don't need any regulations, because you do need some, but we need to let them be able to grow and create jobs so that can help get our economy going. So the manufacturing caucus is an example of them really coming together as an industry, and I'm starting to see some other interesting, and I tell them all the time, you know, every industry should do this, because legislators need to be aware of as much as they can possibly be aware of, and there's so many different industries out there. So for them to be able to get together and create awareness and bring things to our attention.
Any specific legislation, but I mean, not every small business is, you know, an industry. My father's business is a one-guy, or two-guy restoration shop. That's certainly not an industry. It's more craft, really. But, so I was wondering about
There was-
specific legislation that you've worked on.
Actually, there was a bill that we actually got blocked because it was about unemployment, and people, the bill started out looking one way and it ended up being completely something different. And the bill was that if you were unemployed, well, it started out if you were a business, like your dad, and he needed, there was a position open, and he put it out in the paper or on the internet or however he, promoted that position was open. He could not say, and I don't know anybody that would ever say this, but he could not advertise, if you were unemployed, don't apply. So I thought, okay, I don't know who would do that, but if you do, you shouldn't do that. That's discrimination. So the bill started out that if you are a business and you have an open position, you cannot advertise in that way. Well, then when it got to the floor, it had a strike all amendment, and it came in that if you have an open position and somebody applies and they're unemployed and they don't get the job, and they feel that they did not get the job because they were unemployed, they can take that company to the Labor Commission. So your dad has a position open and I'm unemployed, you're not, we both apply for it. Or two people that are unemployed apply for it, and one gets it and one doesn't, and the person feels they did not get it because they were unemployed, then it is up to, and they take it to the Labor Commission, it's up to your dad, the business owner, to prove that that's not why they hired that. So there are some pieces of legislation that,
Well, wouldn't the individual at first, the individual making the claim, first have to make some sort of proof that the only reason they could possibly be denied this job is their employment status?
it was actually on the burden of the business owner to prove that they did not hire that person because they were unemployed. Now, that person could have been unemployed for 10 years, or could have had a job and been unemployed, unemployed, who knows why. But if you are unemployed and you feel that that is why you were not going to get that you didn't get the job, you could take that company, and the company was charged $500 the first time and $1,000 for every other time. So that was good bad legislation that was stopped. So that's an example.
If I can just comment on that, I grew up in a small business family, and from my grandfather to my parents, and then us, and so I get it. And to me, first of all, most people in small businesses actually file, individually. They don't have an LLC, they don't have a PC. They pay their income taxes based on their personal income. Small, like your dad. It's actual small businesses, 1 or 2 people. And, you know, I guess the state has gone so far down the road that it's about getting rid of the things that are bad before you can even, I mean, that's what we do. It's like we're a stopgap every day to stop more bad things that happen. I mean, when you have the highest tax increase in the state of Connecticut's history, and the claim is that this is going to solve all the problems, you know, and then you say, oh, we have a $500 million surplus. Well, let me tell you something. The day the governor said that, in the first week of February, when he did his State of the State address, you know, every one of us, whether it was on TV or in the newspaper or wherever it was, said, and I actually came right out and said, we do not believe that that's real. I'm like, what do you mean it's not real? It's either there or it's not there. Well, here's the problem. If you borrow $100, or if you have your mortgage, and every month you pay $1,000 in your mortgage, and this month you don't pay it. So let's say, they said, you don't have to pay it this month, you can wait. Pay it next month. That doesn't mean you have an extra $1,000 that month, do you? You still have to pay it next month, right? That's exactly how Governor Malloy operates the budget. I mean, we have those economic recovery notes, right, that were $196 million this year that we owed. He deferred them till next year. And then he's like, hey, we have $196 million extra. I mean, that's, to me, maybe I'm missing the entire point here, but that's not extra money.
What if we do that with our income taxes?
Exactly.
What if we all pooled and do that with our income
And
taxes?
so we don't have the ability to do that, but he does. So here's what happened. So now he's like, hey, we have $500 million. You only get $55. And so, okay. And this is, I swear this is, and I know this is maybe disrespectful, but this has got to be, because I can't figure out any other way how you can do things like that. Okay, say we owe $196 million this year, and we know we owe it. I mean, it's not like the feds are going to say, you know what, we like you, so you don't ever have to pay that back. We're going to have to pay it back, right? So we owe that. Then we took money from the operating account, you know, to bonding, and that's $190 million. And that's where they get this $500 million. Where everybody's like, where all of a sudden did it come from? Well, we've been in deficit for all these years, and all of a sudden we get this extra money. They must have gone to sleep every night from January until April 15th and said, please let there be more money in the quarterlies when they come in April. Please let there be more money. Because that was the only way they were going to get the money. And what happened? The end of April came. The quarterly estimates were not what they hoped they would be. And now guess what? No more rebate. Now, I thought that was a ridiculous thing in the first place, but you don't promise somebody something and then take it back. Right? But that's, you know, his issue. Now his whole thing is, you know what? I'm going to do this next year. We're not going to raise taxes again. In fact, we may even cut them. Well, that sounds great, except 4 years ago he said he had no intention of raising taxes, and we knew we had this deficit. Now, it's not about him or a Republican or Democrat. It's just the way it's been for the past 4 years. I mean, that's the factual situation we're in. And who does that hurt? That hurts small businesses. So you have, you know, corporate surcharges that have, you know, increased enormously. You know, your personal income tax that increased. In the past 4 years, we have 77 tax hikes. In 4 years, 77. You know, all over from a cremation tax to the Amazon tax to the gas tax to the nursing home tax to the, you know, everything you can imagine. And that's what makes this state very difficult for small business. So, you know, our job at this point in the minority is to stop the bad stuff, as Lezlye mentioned, from going through, you know, and quite frankly, hope we get people in there, in the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office that are more like-minded, that believe that, you know, small business and individuals are people that drive this economy and stay in this country. And not make you jump through hoops. And make you want to stay here, instead of say, I'm going to stay here just because my family's here. Yes?
My name's Nancy. Probably one of the biggest elephants in the room, I'm sure, here at the legislative offices is Common Core. Talk about a corporate grab at education. I'm a teacher, public school. Amongst ourselves, my colleagues and I have completely, we disbelieve Governor Malloy completely. He has removed the 45% of our evaluations coming from testing, which testing in and of itself, the teachers and I have figured out 35% of our school year is spent in testing, at least at our school. I don't know about other schools. We do so much testing, I'm about a month and a half behind on my curriculum, okay? Because of kids being pulled away for 2 and 3 days at a time for sitting at a computer funded by the almighty corporations called Bill Gates and Pearson, okay, to get money so they can fund the schools with computers. Everybody thinks it's a great idea to have standards. What they don't understand is that standards then become curriculum because schools are forced to put the kids in pigeonholes to make sure that they pass these tests. Because not so much in Connecticut, for 1 year, our evaluations are not tied to the test scores. And the way that UConn has kind of instructed, especially the urban schools, to do their teaching is we differentiate for each student in class, however, the tests do not differentiate. So you teach in 5 different ways in the classroom to accommodate students, the test does not accommodate those students. So where are you guys standing on at least being watchdogs that standards do not become curriculum, because it will absolutely wipe out autonomy on the teachers. The kids will become automatons. You'll see art and music and PE go down the drain. PE to the extent of teachers being creative, okay, in their classes, because that's a federal mandate that they take PE. I'm an art teacher. You really don't want me to have to teach math in my art class, because that's why I'm not a math teacher, okay? English I'm okay with, but grammar pretty good, but they are fixing something that wasn't necessarily broken. And I'm not saying that it was Governor Malloy or Governor Rell or any of the legislatures in the past. This started 30 years ago when we decided to start comparing ourselves with the rest of the world. You can't compare kids in Finland with kids in the United States. When you walk into a Finnish classroom, they're all Finnish. They have a common culture. We do not in the United States. How could you possibly compare the two? I'm just curious as to know what your group, your caucuses, the Republicans are doing to, because this is possibly one of the only truly bipartisan issues in the United States right now. Well, people on both sides that disagree with Common Core like crazy.
Well, let me just say, before we even get to do you like it, do you not like it, why it's good.
No, I mean, you can't even get into that.
Before we even get to that, okay? The way the legislature works is a legislator comes up with an idea. We either came up with it on our own, a constituent gave it to us, we saw it, whatever it is, okay? You propose a bill. The bill goes to the Committee of Cognizance, so say Common Core would be education, of course. And then, hopefully, that bill is scheduled for a public hearing, so people from all over the state can come up and say, we like it, we don't like it, here's why it's good, here's why it's everything. And have a conversation and ask questions and be asked questions of by that committee. That's how it works. And at its core, that's what our democracy and our legislature is about. Okay? You have to give us that input. Never happened.
Never happened.
With Common Core. And let me say this. We went to the governor. I personally met with superintendents in my district, had them sit in the office and say, what do you like about it, what don't you like about it, tell me, and people that are actually friends of mine, they gave me their personal opinion that were superintendents. Went to the education committee chairs, refused to have a public hearing. So what we did, which was in the House Republican caucus, which was something that I don't think had ever been done before, was we availed ourselves of this very narrow process called the petition process. And we got legislators to sign onto it. And when you get a certain number on there, you have to have a public hearing. And the only reason there was a public hearing on that was because of us. And this isn't about, yay, how great are we? But we were intimately involved in that. Because when you don't even listen, we have a public hearing on if some dog poops in your lawn, right? Honestly, the most inane things. And this is a significant philosophical change in our education system of our children. Okay, so first and foremost, that was a major thing that we did this year and felt very strongly about it. Secondly, when we, after meeting with all these superintendents and teachers and, you know, we came to conclude that what you said about, and that was the thing that struck me the most. One of my superintendents told me that the teacher evaluations, he's got to send his, assistant principal has to do so much work in doing that he can't send him to continuing education things anymore. He can't send him to deal with the reason he's there, to do his job, because it takes so much time. And once again, no public hearing. And if we're going to change anything, to me, it's in an incremental change. I mean, you don't just say, okay, well, all of a sudden, June, you're doing it one way. And now the last week of
That's
August, you
totally
now have
what it was.
Common Core and have to evaluate teachers in a whole different way. So the way it was even implemented was ridiculous. Then there was no public hearing after, before the fact and after the fact.
But at its core,
Until we pushed
Common Core in and of itself is a national standards, which I have national standards for my field. They're excellent. I've used them for 25 years. They're excellent. They allow me a lot of autonomy. I can be as creative as I want to be as a teacher. I can try new things. If I go to a testing mode in my area, I become like the Soviet Union and Mao's China. You produce this kind of art. You do this kind of music. You do this. That's what's going to happen.
And it's what you said, the testing, if your kids are brighter, the test will go up. But if your kids have a harder time
Right.
learning, the test is not adjusted.
So our
in.
urban areas in Connecticut, because of the inequality, are...
So what's going to happen to special ed kids?
Oh.
Or kids that have a little harder time learning, than kids? Because I know, we have my teachers, they talk about all the paperwork. Just tons and
unbelievable.
tons, and how many hours it takes them. And the testing was a huge issue.
And we'll give
because-
kudos to any parents at Amity High School, because we heard over at my school that quite a few parents held their students, because there is an opt-out, parental opt-out in the state of Connecticut for testing.
Yes.
And they did hold their kids out, and Dr. Britton at Amity High School sent out something to all the parents saying, oh, you shouldn't be afraid to take these tests. No, how about we want our students in class learning in a variety of ways, not taking computerized tests where you have 30 seconds to answer a question, and if you don't answer it the way that the test wants you to answer it, it's wrong. There's no leeway on it at all. So
And that's
it's
part of the
dehumanizing.
problem too with these kind of things, because, you have, principals, administrators, and teachers. Some people, I've honestly heard some say, oh, it's the greatest thing, and then others say, this is the worst thing we've ever seen. And so that but you have to.
Nobody's against the standards
Right,
as
no, I agree.
teachers.
I agree
But
with you.
because the standards are kind of ridiculous in a lot of ways, especially the 3rd to 5th grade math standards, and they're next to impossible. The kids it's so developmentally inappropriate.
I think first grade's pretty tough.
Yeah,
I try to explain to
you're
my
agonizing over
parents.
it. People are confused between what is rigor and what is critical thinking. They think that by taking a 5th grade curriculum and teaching it to a 3rd grade to a 3rd grader, you're going to make them smarter. It doesn't work that way, especially when you've got about 17 different learning styles in the classroom. It's impossible. So, it bears watching big, because I think that parents are starting to get hip to the fact that this is not appropriate. You don't want kids in America to be cookie cutters of everybody else.
It's big, as you know, it's people on both sides of it, but I hear a lot about the teachers, the paperwork, the testing, that was.
It's the time out of instruction, especially for AP students at the high school level. They have to take an AP test, or a UConn or an ECE test, but they're spending, juniors especially are spending, 3 and 4 and 5 days, sometimes twice a year, taking a test. And then they got to do it again.
What did the legislature do on the minimum wage?
On what?
On the minimum wage?
It went up. It was passed again.
10-10, I think,
10.
in January,
Yeah.
January 1st, it will be 10-10.
No, I think it's 17.
This-
I think January 17 it will go to 10-10.
But it will go up every year up until then. I
Yes,
believe.
because it was increased
Oh, I
last
see.
session, and then it was increased again this
I
session.
see.
Representative Zupkus, could you explain your vote on that minimum wage bill?
I voted against it. I voted because I believe businesses, I talked to a bunch of my small businesses, to your point earlier, and they just cannot afford it. I was having a conversation with somebody and they were saying how, they have they had a Blimpies business, and they had employees that, they had one guy who came, he was wonderful, came to work, loved his job, was paid over the minimum wage at the time, and they had a bunch of other people to fill in that never came late all the time, but they had to hire them to keep their business afloat. And then by the minimum wage going up, they had to increase these people that weren't so great producers, and then they had to increase the guy who really ran the whole show, and they just did not keep doing that, so they happened to lay people off because of that. It was just passed last session, as you know, and to pass it again is another hardship on businesses.
What would your answer be to someone who would say, Representative Zupkus, when you have an economy that's based 70% on consumer spending, wouldn't more money sort of working that water wheel come back around to benefit those same employers, that same Blimpies, and more people can go and afford to buy a sandwich?
Nancy, I don't think by raising the minimum wage a few cents is going to make people go out and spend money. People need to pay their bills. People are hurting. We're the highest state on taxes. That money's going to go to taxes, quite honestly. Our state is the latest state to have to cover your taxes. It's May 19th or something. So, people work from May 19th just to pay their taxes. Taxes are going to go up again, probably, because we have a deficit. We're balancing a budget on things that I don't know how they're going to come in, and how is making a few more dollars. People have to feed their kids. They just increased the gas tax. People have to get to work. People have to clothe their kids. People have to put their kids in daycare and go to a job. And if an employer is having a hard time because people are enforcing more regulations and more laws and more rules on them, they're not going to hire. There's a business in Middlebury. They hire mostly summer help. They cannot afford to keep running when minimum wage keeps going up and up. So they're not going to hire those people. They're not going to hire as many people as they have.
And it's just another in the line of things that the state has done that has made it difficult for businesses to stay afloat. Whether it's paid sick leave or whether it's, any of those things that we've done recently in the past 5 or 6 years in particular. Listen, if you can afford 10 employees and now you can only afford 8. So how does that help somebody with minimum wage goes up because 2 people are not even going to have a job now? And I understand people think differently about it, I do, but in this day and age where every single thing we do almost hurts you as a small business, I can't really justify doing anything else. Of course, I want every single person to have a job. We all do. That's the perfect world. But government can't create jobs. Only businesses can create jobs. We can only give businesses the tools to thrive. And if you thrive, then you hire more people. If you hire more people, people make money, and then they can add to the economy in that way.
Have you ever looked at the administrative costs of some of these laws and regulations that the state puts out, and also the lending, the money that goes into some of the businesses from the state? Administrative costs, in a lot of cases, require businesses to hire extra people just to manage the paperwork. And, I know I just did a federal grant, and it got up almost 10%. And there's got to be some way that legislators, and I know you don't write the implementing instructions, and that's where the catch is. You write the law, it says we're going to do this and this, but how it actually gets done, some regulator and some state agency does it. And they want to make sure they cover all the bases. When they do that, they jack up the administrative costs of that law or that loan or whatever else. And then when you require oversight, you add an extra burden on them. which is probably one of the reasons the Veterans Administration is such a problem right now, is all this oversight that's on them. It's been that way for years. But there's got to be some way to cut the admin costs, because it's killing businesses, small business especially.
I mean, I think part of that answer is, there's too much regulation in there, then there doesn't have to be so much to oversee. Everything's overly regulated,
Yeah.
everything, and double and triple regulated, and that's, another part of what makes it difficult to
But
do
if you
business.
put a proviso in the law, it says, this implementation of this law will require no more than X percentage, some sort of percentage in there of the cost of implementing it. In other words, especially if it's a loan or something from an agency that the state that gives money, you cannot cause more money to be spent, because they're spending money on the just to answer the questions and don't get the job done with what money they got.
Hold on, this gentleman has had his hand up
Sorry.
forever.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, you said that government can't create jobs. I find it interesting how the only economy on the eastern seaboard that is actually improving is the greater Metro DC area in Virginia, Maryland, and so forth. So
Well,
just
it's
a
also,
slight correction on your...
to correct myself a second time, the biggest employer in the state of Connecticut is the state of Connecticut.
Exactly.
Okay, but that's not creating jobs.
I understand that.
And I
was
know
just-
you were just,
Sorry.
that's the shame of
My
it.
turn.
That's the shame of it. To Leslie's point earlier on, she said, as we call, when I talked about reform, and then you said we call bills certain things. I mean, a couple years ago, we had the jobs bill. What exactly does that mean? That's not, that was 5 million different things in it that was, finagling all sorts of things to make people think, oh, great, they're helping, create jobs. We can't make them, we can only help you thrive so you can create them.
I would venture to say that statistically, in every state, that the public service employees are
Right, I'm
probably,
sure. I'm just, I
a big chunk of the
already know
economy
of our
anyway.
own, so, you're right, yeah.
In Milford, I think the legislature, or the representative, proposed a moratorium on 830G applications. Do you know if that got passed?
On what?
830G affordable
For
housing
housing.
applications.
Now, that's proposed every year. That's another one of those controversial issues where, smaller towns don't want affordable, suburban towns typically don't want affordable housing in their towns, and they at very least want it limited. I don't believe that was passed. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it was, because every year, we have an influx of bills in that regard. In fact, a colleague of ours who just passed away on Saturday in the House, that was his big thing. I mean, he would put in 30 bills on affordable housing moratoriums and applications and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't believe we did it. I could be wrong, but I don't believe we did anything on that, because that would have been a big deal. That would be a very
Right.
controversial thing, so that did not, as far as I know, unless they tweaked it a little bit, but I don't think there was a moratorium. But we can check it out.
All right,
So, thank you.
great, thank you. One last question?
One last thing. I had, when you went through your campaign the last time, Representative Zupkus, I remember a lot of the common sense manifesto, common sense principles, or your platform. One thing I was never clear on was your stand on choice. I had just never
What
heard
kind
it.
of choice?
Reproductive choice.
Reproductive
Yes.
choice? Well, my kids are adopted from China. So, to me, are you talking abortion? Is that what do you mean, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
the choice.
My kids are adopted, so there are 2 women in China that chose not to do that. So to me, I have 2 beautiful girls because of that. If someone wants to make a choice, that's not going to come before the state. I would really have to think about that, talk to people, see how they believe. Personally, I don't know that I would do it. Just say if you wanted to do it, that's your decision. So,
I knew it had been an issue,
but that's
You
not
know,
common sense
for-
policy.
further out in the country. So I was just curious what you guys thought.
That's mine.
Yeah, you mentioned the gas tax several times, and I thought I heard on the news recently that I think Senator Murphy's proposing another gas tax
I
increase.
heard that. Sure he is.
6 cents or something
Yeah,
like that?
that's surprising. We have the highest, if not one of the highest gas tax in the country. The problem with the gas taxes, we have the state tax, then you have the federal tax, then you have the gross receipts tax, which most people aren't aware of, but that third tax is a very squirrely tax because it's a percentage of the wholesale price of gas. So basically, if we say to you, you know what, we're gonna help you out, and we're now gonna lower the price, the state part of the gas tax, 10 cents, tomorrow, you may go and say, oh, it's lower 10 cents. The next day, it could be up 20 cents. Because the gross receipts tax is, like I said, it's like a rolling tax. Whatever the wholesale price of gas is, as that moves along up and down, that's why the gas tax moves up and down, because it's a percentage of that. So it's not one, it's 3 different taxes at the gas pump. I don't know why in God's name you propose to increase it as if it's not high enough.
I don't think they understand how much of the gas prices affect a personal
No,
home budget
don't.
economy.
They don't.
Get it.
They're just trying to find ways to find more revenue so they can spend it.
Saving me lots of money because I don't go shopping anymore.
Yeah.
It costs too much to get to the store.
That's right.
There's always online shopping, remember that.
Don't start.
All the food prices go up.
No, they come back.